Hi there! Welcome to this lesson about core subject number 2 to include in your personal sustainable procurement strategy later on. To achieve results by working on better human rights in doing your work as procurement manager, you can use many tactics. We are going to discuss 8 tactics and an example of how you can practice human rights in your own strategy. Let's go! In recent years, procurement has increasingly been recognized as a means for states and companies to fulfill their human rights obligations and to realize sustainable development, including requirements within procurement that suppliers respect human rights, can help prevent human rights abuses, including modern slavery, child labor, human trafficking, excessive working hours and unsafe working conditions. Also, with the increasing digitization and emergence of artificial intelligence, human rights need to be integrated into the design and delivery of procurement. The tactics we will discuss are based on internationally recognized human rights, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, the Core Human Rights Convention, and the United Nations Guiding Principles on Human Rights. If you are working in public procurement, this template can help you. Depending on the sector you are working in, there are 4 reasons why it is important to work on human rights. Fulfilling legal obligations is the first. Depending on your country, your company could have a legal obligation to protect human rights, which includes the human rights of individuals in the value chain of businesses supplying goods and services to you. The second is risk management. The primary risk that you must address is that procurement could be linked to serious harm to individuals. But there are other risks that public buyers and suppliers must consider, including legal, financial risks and reputational risks. If addressed effectively, some of these risks may become opportunities. For instance, a supplier that takes effective steps to respect the human rights of workers may be viewed and evaluated more favorably by procurement managers and investors. Reputation also has value for companies. Association with human rights abuses may deter potential customers or employees and undermine your credibility. Leading by example is the third. If you implement requirements that suppliers must respect when it comes to human rights, this will encourage other sectors towards the same aim. Creating a level playing field is our fourth. If procurement managers require suppliers to respect human rights when providing your company with goods and services, this helps to create a level playing field for suppliers that strive to respect human rights. Businesses that abuse human rights, for example, by employing children to perform horrible tasks, taking workers' passports away, or making excessive deductions from their wages, may gain an unfair competitive advantage over businesses that respect human rights. Some businesses are moving ahead with measures to respect human rights. Yet, when these efforts are not recognized or valued in procurement exercises, it may discourage such businesses from sustaining responsible business practices. It may also deter other businesses from addressing human rights risks or abuses. Your practices should ensure that all suppliers play by the same rules. For the ones working in public procurement, we attached 4 great files in the extra reading material of this lesson that will help you in working on your sustainable human rights strategy. For all procurement managers, we will discuss 8 tactics that you can implement yourself now. The first is due diligence. You can choose to set up a due diligence process with a proactive approach to identifying the actual and potential adverse human rights impact of procurement decisions and activities with the aim of avoiding and mitigating those impacts. Identify, prevent and address actual or potential negative impacts on human rights resulting from their activities by an initial assessment of suppliers. The second we would like to discuss is human right risk of situations. Analyze potential adverse impacts on human rights in your supply chain. You as procurement manager should be alert to the supply of goods and services from areas of conflict or from areas where is political instability. Also, you take into account corrupt business practices with an absence of civil rights or legal protection, extreme poverty and poor standards of health with communities of indigenous people and those where child labor is used. The third tactic is avoidance of complicity. You should avoid being complicit in assisting the commission of actions by suppliers or contractors that are inconsistent with or disrespectful of human rights. The fourth is resolving grievances. Establish a transparent grievance mechanism to enable stakeholders that believe their human rights have been abused. Map internal feedback mechanisms and identify who can access them. For example, staff, contractors, suppliers, subcontractors, and other relevant external stakeholders. The remedy process should be designed to deliver mutually agreed solutions to grievances through engagement between the affected parties, you as procurement manager and your suppliers. The fifth is discrimination and vulnerable groups. Make sure to enable communication with your suppliers to ensure that the procurement of goods and services does not involve discrimination against workers, local communities, women and girls, people with disabilities, or other vulnerable groups such as the elderly and the poor. Also, make sure to avoid discrimination based on race or religion. The sixth I would like to discuss with you is civil and political rights. Make sure as a procurement manager to respect the civil and political rights of stakeholders involved in the supply chains for the production of goods and services, such as the right to a life with dignity, the right to personal security, freedom from torture, freedom of association, and freedom of opinion. The seventh is about economic, social, and cultural rights. Make sure to enable and encourage the right of employees of your suppliers in your value chain to make sure to practice local culture, work in just and favorable conditions, enjoy an adequate standard of health, enjoy a standard of living adequate to maintain their physical and mental health and well-being, adequate food, clothing, housing, medical care, and social protection. Do not limit but facilitate access to essential services such as water, electricity, and medical care. This brings us to the eighth and final tactic which I would like to discuss with you, and this is about the fundamental principles and rights at work. Make sure to ensure, in collaboration with suppliers, that basic human rights in labor issues are maintained. I'm talking about freedom of association, collective bargaining, no forced labor, equal opportunities and preventing discrimination, and of course avoiding child labor. We will end this lesson now with some practical tips. To assess potential risks, you could map the top tiers of your value chain for upcoming large-scale tenders. Use internal and public data to see if there are reports of human rights issues for geographic regions, sectors or specific businesses relevant to your tender. Select then, as step 2, an upcoming tender with high risks to use as a pilot project. To engage your suppliers, you could incorporate a session on human rights in market testing exercise to gain an understanding of the maturity of your supplier base. This will help you to identify areas where progress can be achieved immediately and those where change will take more time. In addition to market testing with suppliers, consider ways to get feedback from other stakeholders like supplier associations, workers, worker organizations, end users, as well as communities which may be impacted by human rights abuses in your company's value chain. As selection criteria, you could include simple criteria like transparent and which are achievable for suppliers and easily accessible for you. Examples include a requirement that the supplier must have a policy that addresses human rights. You could also consider to give weight to human rights protections when scoring bids and consider cascading contractual requirements for suppliers to their subcontractors. In the end, establish a dialogue with suppliers on your goals, risks and expectations, and tell them how they intend to comply with the contractual human rights requirements that you want from them. To monitor your suppliers, you could include a requirement that suppliers must report annually on how they are meeting human rights requirements within the contract. You could discuss annual reports with suppliers and support them in developing action points to address risks and opportunities identified in reports. And that's it, a wrap on human rights. In the next lesson, we are going to dive into the next core concept, labor practices. See you there.